This episode goes out to Angus, absolute magic on both sides of the camera. Hi there, Garrett Robinson here. Welcome to the 17th episode of the Nightblade Epic Podcast Season 3. Welcome to December, listener. 2 quick announcements. First, it's a new month and we've got a new book. Hellskin, the latest book of Underrealm, is out there in the world. Thank you to everyone who pre-ordered the book. We had an amazing release weekend, and that's because of you. If you didn't pre-order, you can still pick up the book now at Amazon.com. For our second announcement, we're now offering free shipping on a full set of Underrealm hardcovers for the holidays. The Underrealm hardcover collection is a quartet of gorgeous books. These are the big, thick fantasy tomes you remember from your dad's bookshelf growing up, full of adventure and magic and friendship. Together, they form the beginning of the epic tapestry of Underrealm that you're hearing in this very podcast. There's no better Christmas present for you or for the fantasy fan in your life. And now, if you live in the United States, you can get the whole collection with free shipping. I even sign each individual book before sending it to you. That's how grateful I am to you for being an awesome reader. To pick up your Underrealm full hardcover collection with free shipping, just go to underrealm.net/books. That's underrealm.net/books. Okay, now it's time for today's episode. Today, you're getting chapters 23 and 24 of Darkfire. When we left off, Jordell and Lauren had set off to infiltrate the mysterious mountain fortress. Enjoy! Darkfire, Chapter 23. While Lauren fetched her black cloak, Jordell shed his brown one and placed it, folded, within his saddlebags. They slipped out of the cave and into the rain, running first to the base of the castle's wall before creeping along it as she had done with Alburn before. When they reached the southwestern corner, Jordell stopped for a moment and turned to her. "I told you this place was built by mystics," he said, "and our strongholds have always been built with a back entrance. We know the value of information, and a messenger sent out in the night may break a siege when the army inside cannot." "You know a way in, then?" said Lauren. "Mayhap, but only if they have not barred the door. I hope they have not, and that they do not even know of the entrance I speak of." So saying, he took her around to the northern side of the stronghold. The great stone shelf narrowed on that side to only a few paces across, and Lauren looked at the cliff's edge with some apprehension. She could see the value in such a design. Even if an attacking army were to send some of its soldiers around the sides, they could be easily shoved into the abyss by defenders with stones or perhaps long polearms. Any ladders they raised could be cast off, flinging attackers to the valley floor. But she could see nothing of the door Jordell had spoken of, only the same stony surface as the rest of the walls, well laid with mortar. Yet Jordell walked with clear purpose until he had come to the center of the northern wall. There he paused for a moment, feeling around with his fingers. "What are you looking for?" whispered Lauren. "There will be a catch," said Jordell. "It should be, here." His fingers slipped into a crack Lauren had not seen, and he pulled on something. She heard a sharp click, and the stones began to shift. They swung in on great iron hinges, though Lauren heard almost no sound. The small scrape of stone grinding on stone was muffled by the rain that pelted them. As soon as the gap was wide enough to enter, Jordell slipped in and waited for Lauren to follow him. Once inside, they pushed the door shut again and found themselves in utter blackness. Though she could feel Jordell's breath on her face, she could not see him. "I wish I had brought a torch," he quipped. "Come, we shall have to feel our way. Place your hand upon my shoulder." She did as he said, and slowly he led her forwards with one hand on the wall. They did not go very far before he stopped abruptly. Lauren reached past him to feel a wooden surface blocking their way. "A door?" she whispered. "More likely a shelf. Be quiet a moment." She felt him lean forwards, and she pushed past him to do the same. Together they pressed their ears to the wood, straining to hear any sound. But after several moments, Lauren had heard nothing. "It seems the cells are unoccupied," said Jordell. "That is good. Come, help me move this." Together they pushed, and the shelf swung away on the same silent hinges as the stone door through which they had entered. Within, at last, there was some light, the very faint glow of a torch, but after the darkness of the passage it seemed as bright as the sun. Lauren saw a hallway lined with stone cells stretching away from them, each barred by an iron door. The shelf they had moved stood at the end of the passage. There was no one in sight. The door at the hallway's other end had a torch set into the wall just beside it. "They have set a torch," she observed. "That means they must come here every so often." "Just so. We would do well to leave before anyone sees us." First they pushed the shelf back against the wall, sealing the passageway entrance. Then Jordell led her at a quick, crouching run to the front of the hallway. Again they pressed their ears to the wood, and again they heard only silence. "Beyond we shall find a passageway," said Jordell. "To the right there will be a barracks, which we should avoid at all costs. But to the left there will be a guard room, empty except at the changing of the watch. Follow me there, as quietly as ever you can." He swung the door open, and its hinges screamed as they turned. But there was nothing for it unless they wanted to go back, so they darted through and down the hallway, closing the door behind them with another terrible squeak from the hinges. Only a few paces down, they found the door Jordell had mentioned and slipped inside. The room was empty, and they halted on the other side, breathing hard as they listened. There was only silence. "A stroke of luck," said Jordell. "It seems your fortune is not entirely ill." "If my fortune were any good, I would not be in this place at all," said Lauren. "Do not be so quick to judge your fate. Look." At the back of the room was a hearth with a low fire burning, but beside it sat many chests of drawers. Jordell opened them, and inside they found clothes of gray and dark blue, as well as shirts of chain and helmets. The helmets had slits for the eyes and another slit down the front for the mouth, but other than that they covered the face entirely. There were also swords, very plain, and belts to hold them. "Uniforms for the guards, no doubt," said Jordell. "A great stroke of fortune. Come, dress quickly." He threw the clothes on over his own, along with a dirty gray cloak, and traded his own broadsword for one of the blades in the chest. Lauren, too, put the uniform on over her clothes. They stank of sweat and grease and ale, but she had smelled far worse. The helmets were another matter. The stench of others' breath had permeated them, and no matter how many she tried on, they all contained the reek. Most were also too small, and when she finally found one that would go down on her head, it jiggled uncomfortably. "Put up the hood of your cloak to cover your hair," said Jordell. "Anyone among the guards would likely have cut theirs short." When they had finished, Lauren hardly recognized the mystic, or, looking down, herself. "I feel I could walk straight up to Damaris and greet her, and she would never look twice at me." "Mayhap you are right, but let us not chance it," said Jordell. She could barely see his smile through the slit in his helmet. "Come, let us see what may be seen. Whoever commands this stronghold will be in the main hall, the doors of which are often open. That is where we shall go first." They returned to the hallway. There was no one about. Jordell turned right, leading her past the doors to the cells where they had come in. Next, they passed the barracks he had mentioned. Thankfully, the door was closed, though Lauren could hear voices on the other side. The hallway turned left soon after, and they rounded the corner with it. Lauren almost froze. Coming down the hallway towards them were two guards dressed in the same clothes as themselves, though their helmets were off and held under their arms. They did not speak or laugh with each other, and their eyes went immediately to Jordell and Lauren. She barely managed to maintain her composure and keep walking by his side. After a moment, the other guards' eyes left them and grew bored, and they passed without comment. Once they had turned the corner, Lauren let out a long breath. "That went well," murmured Jordell, "and tells us something valuable. Do you know what it is?" Lauren thought hard. The guards could not have seen their faces, but surely had seen their eyes, and anyone could recognize a friend, or even a comrade, by eyes alone. "The guards do not know each other well," said Lauren, "so either there are a great many of them here, or else none have been here very long." "Yet you see how threadbare the clothes are, and how tarnished the blades," said Jordell. "So it is the former. There are many soldiers here, enough for it to be no great surprise to see another guardsman you do not recognize at once. New guards likely arrive often, coming in caravans like the one Damaris led here. But come, here is the main hall." A great threshold lay ahead and to the right, with its wide wooden doors thrown open. Lauren tried to walk as Jordell did, in a sort of half-march while resting her left hand upon the hilt of her sword. As they passed the doorway, she turned her head to the right, as though idly curious. In the moment it took them to cross the door, she took in the room beyond. The great hall was many paces long, with large stone pillars that rose into arches to support the ceiling. The floor was all of white stone, though it had grown dirty, and Lauren could see rubbish in the corners. High above, near the ceiling, many rafters of thick wood crisscrossed the space. The largest stretched all the way across the room, to small windows that let in blue moon's light to battle the orange glow of the torches set along the walls. At the other end of the hall sat a large wooden chair upon a dais, almost a throne, though not quite grandiose enough to earn the name. Upon that chair sat a huge brute of a man, bare arms thickly muscled and covered with designs inked into the skin, leaning one elbow on the chair's arm while his chin rested in his palm. His black hair hung thin and long, ratty and filthy, and on his chin was a thick scrub of beard. He wore a dark breastplate over a leather tunic with no sleeves. Plates covered his legs as well, which ended in great steel boots that had small spikes worked into the toes. About the room, in positions of rest, stood several guards, covered head to toe in metal, with great longswords hanging from their hips. Before the dais knelt a page dressed in green. A man of the family Yaren, Lauren thought, whose head was bowed and who spoke words she could not hear. But more than to the man on the chair, Lauren's eyes were drawn to the symbol displayed over his head, a great design worked in black metal and gold, affixed to the wall behind him at the back of the room. The black was woven into sharp, twisting shapes that wrapped about each other in an endless knot, jutting out in all directions with sharp points. She did not recognize it, but still it seemed somehow familiar. With a start, she realized it resembled the markings on her dagger, and her hand fell to its hilt beneath her gray cloak. She could feel Jordell seize up beside her as they passed the door, though she could not be certain why. Mayhap he had recognized the man on the chair, or mayhap the symbol meant something to him. Once they were out of sight of the main hall, she whispered, "Who was that? What did you see?" "Speak later," said Jordell. "We should not be seen muttering to each other." The hallway stretched a long way farther on before turning left again, continuing a circuit that would lead them around the walls of the stronghold and back to where they had started. Jordell passed every door, peering in casually whenever one stood open. They saw another barracks, and once they passed a door just as a guard came through it. Beyond was another room full of cells, just like the one they had entered. At last, when they had neared the southeast corner of the fortress and the end of the hallway, they saw a room with many tables laid out and a cooking pot resting on sticks above a fire. A handful of people sat at the tables eating, fortress soldiers in gray and blue alongside Yaren guards in green. Here Jordell paused and turned to her. "We shall go in here for just a moment. Do not remove your helmet for any reason, nor speak. If anyone asks, I shall answer them. We cannot risk the Yeren men recognizing you, but they will not know my face, for I have had few dealings with them." Lauren almost answered him, but instead nodded mutely. Jordell smiled. "Well done. Come." He walked in, bold as daylight, going to a table very near the cooking fire and removing his helmet as he sat. 2 stronghold guards sat there, a thick woman with hair so dark it was almost black, and a thin, ratty man with one of his front teeth missing. They barely looked up as Jordell sat across from them. "Ho," said Jordell, nodding. He scooped up a half-eaten bowl of stew, abandoned by some other guard, and dug in with his fingers. The ratty man eyed him for a moment at that, but soon returned his gaze to his own food. Lauren studied them, trying to see if she could learn anything from their actions. They seemed almost determined not to notice anyone or anything around them, hardly raising their eyes from the table. She looked past them to the Yeren guards a few tables over. Their eyes roamed more freely, but in them Lauren could see distrust and annoyance. They did not want to be here, and most likely saw these guards as beneath them. The thick woman looked at Lauren after a moment and raised her chin. "Do you mean to eat or sit sweating in that helmet all night, girl?" "A new recruit," said Jordell. "She said she lost her appetite." "New and green, that is plain to see," said the ratty man. "And I do not just mean her eyes." "Speaking of green," Jordell said, tossing his head towards the Yeren guards. "What about these ones, eh? They have a lordly bearing, that is certain." The thick woman grunted. "That is what happens when you work for lords and ladies. The high ones on the king's seat, anyhow, not like the lord." The lord. Lauren heard in their voices the same reverence and fear she had heard from the satyrs. It must be the man sitting on the great chair in the main hall. But who was he? "You mean that pretty one, eh?" said Jordell. "I have not heard what she is doing round here. What do you know?" They both stopped eating and looked up at him. "You know no one has spoken of her purpose here, nor will they." Jordell looked conspiratorially over his shoulder and leaned forwards, fingertips pressed to the table. "Of course, but some whispers always seep through the cracks." The thick woman stood abruptly, the ratty man rising to join her a moment later. Both scowled down at Jordell as though he had given some great offense. "It seems you are as green as the girl you sit with," said the woman. "Still your whispering tongue, newcomer, or you might find it cut out." They left the common room without another word. Lauren moved to leave the table, but Jordell placed a hand on her arm. "Stay for a moment while I eat," he muttered. "We must not seem nervous, now more than ever." So she forced herself to sit still, though every part of her wanted to flee the room and the stronghold both, vanishing into the mountains as Albern had advised. But after a moment, another man came to sit with them. This one was broad as Jordell and mayhap a bit taller. His long, sandy hair hung freely to his shoulders, and while his eyes were dark, they glittered nonetheless. An easy smile rested at the corner of his mouth, and Lauren thought she might find it there often. "Do not mind those two," he said to them. "They are not half the old salts they want to appear, just experienced enough to want to make others feel less so." "I know the sort," said Jordell. "But have no fear. It takes more than 2 ratty guards to put the fright in me." "That is good to hear," said the newcomer. "Courage will matter more than petty politics if a fight comes." "Is one coming, then?" said Jordell. "That would be more entertaining than walking a wall all day." "You and I like different kinds of excitement, it seems," said the man, eyes twinkling as he surveyed Jordell's face. Then he leaned in closer, dropping his voice. "But mayhap we shall both have our wish. These green cloaks bring cargo for the Lord, weapons or some such. I have heard the Lord wants them badly, but you would never know it. The Yeren woman has been waiting for his audience since she arrived. But her wait is nearly over, for she will be received soon. I brought the message to her room myself." His talk of weapons held meaning for Lauren. Damaris was here to bring mage stones. The merchant must have retrieved more, for Lauren had destroyed most of her stores before fleeing the city of Cabris. but Yaren's reach was long, and doubtless they had many more of the precious gems stored about the 9 lands. Lauren did not want to think what this stronghold, peopled by mysterious soldiers and ruled by an unknown lord, would need with so many wagons full of the things. It seemed Jordell was right, and that the battle in Wellmont had been only the first step in some much greater plot. She thought she understood now. These soldiers must be from Dorsey. With their army invading from the south, they were amassing a secret strength in the Great Rocks to attack Selvin from the west. They had to do something about it, though Lauren did not have the faintest idea what. She supposed they could warn Selvin's king, but that road was one she could hardly imagine, even if she were not riding with an outcast mystic and a wizard ravaged by mage-stones. If Jordell guessed at her thoughts, he gave no sign. He only nodded mutely and dug the last of his stew from the bowl with his fingers. After licking them clean slowly, he stood and adjusted his belt. "It is nice to know there is at least one friendly face in these walls. Well met, friend, and may we sup again another time." Lauren realized she was still sitting and leaped quickly to her feet. She mumbled something under her helmet, but their friend never noticed, holding his eyes on Jordell. "Well met indeed. Try not to drown in all this rain." Jordell gave a light laugh and walked out, Lauren hurrying after him. Darkfire, Chapter 24. Jordell led her away from the mess hall and through the stronghold's corridors back the way they had come. At first Lauren thought he must be bringing them to the exit, but he strode right past it and back to the guard room. Thankfully, it was still empty, and he threw the bolt behind them after they closed the door. "Did I guess right from his words?" said Lauren. "Did Damaris come all this way to bring her mage-stones to this stronghold?" "That would be my guess," said Jordell. "And it explains why she should come on such a roundabout path. If she were to ride straight for Northwood, she would surely have caught the attention of the King's Law." "We must warn Selvin, I suppose," said Lauren, her mind turning to how they could possibly cross the whole kingdom, with the mystics and constables both at their heels. "No, we can send no word of this yet," said Jordell, as if distracted. "Not until we have tended to more pressing matters." "What could be more urgent? These are Dorshan men intent on invading Selvin." Jordell shook his head. "I wish that were so, but it is not. These are no men of Dorsey, nor any of the 9 lands, I fear. They are something far darker, far more terrible. When first I saw this stronghold, I thought I might find them within, though I held to a faint hope that it would not be so." "Who are they, then?" Jordell shook his head and paced the room. From within his helmet, his keen blue eyes pierced hers of green. "You remember that in Wellmont I spoke with Zane? I told him much that I have told few other souls, much more than it seems I should have. I am not eager to repeat that mistake again, yet I must trust you with some of it." "I have shown you time and again that I am worthy of such trust," said Lauren. "So you have." He hesitated a moment before nodding. "So you have. Then know this. The men in this stronghold are Shades, a name that for centuries was nothing more than a frightened whisper in the dark. Yet some among the mystics remember them, and I recognize the symbol they have hung above the throne in the main hall." "And yet I have never heard of them," said Lauren. "Are they a type of wizard, then?" "No, nothing so simple," said Jordell. "In truth, they are like the mystics. Some of their number are among the mighty of the 9 lands, while some are simple soldiers like me." "You have never been a simple soldier," said Lauren. "But if these Shades are like the mystics, why are they so feared? I thought the mystics obeyed the will of the High King." "So we do, but they are like us only in formation. Where we are light, they are the darkness. Where we are red, they are the ghostly gray of death. They serve a master far more terrible than any wizard king you have heard of in tales, or they served her, I should say, for they have not been seen in many hundreds of years." "Do you mean the man in the main hall?" said Lauren. "Is he the lord the satyrs spoke of?" "No, I very much doubt that. Their master would not be seated so clearly in view, and yet in such a mean place as this. The master's place is atop the gilded throne of a kingdom torn to rubble, or else in the shadows of a land about to fall." Despite the darkness of his words, Lauren thought she could see a sense of excitement growing within him, an itching impatience that made his fingers twitch and his feet stamp. He resumed his pacing, a growing light in his eyes. "But if she is back, or he, I might say, for it could be, then that means the other, too, has returned. I have not been misled. After all this time, I can tell my masters with certainty. And yet no, not yet. Some other purpose may have brought the shades here. We must learn more." He was talking to himself now, and though Lauren understood the words, their deeper meaning eluded her. She gripped his arms and turned him towards her. "Jordell, what master do they serve if no one has seen her in centuries, and how can she still live? You speak of her as if she were elvenkind." Jordell shook his head. "No, nothing like that. Then we would certainly be doomed. Now there is still hope, but we must learn what Damaris is doing here. And more than that, we must learn how much she knows of the shades. They must be powerful, more powerful than I could have dreaded if they have kept her waiting so long since her arrival. Seeing how the man in the main hall comports himself around Damaris will be as valuable as hearing the words they speak." "I still do not understand. You have explained nothing." "I've told you all I know for certain," said Jordell. "They are shades, and they once served a dark master who means to do no good to any within the 9 lands. I do not know if they serve her still, or how great her might may have grown. This could be some forgotten remnant of their number, hiding in the caves of the great rocks for centuries, who have only recently emerged to take this stronghold. Yet I do not think so. It is far more important to learn what Yeren is doing here, and what Damaris hopes to gain from associating with such dark partners in trade." "And just how do you mean to do that?" Jordell smiled. "The answer is simple, though you will not like it. I mean to attend her meeting with the master of this stronghold." Lauren felt her stomach clench. The thought of being in that long hall at the same time as Damaris made her ill. But she steeled herself. This, after all, was the sort of life the Nightblade should expect. "You mean to be one of the guards in attendance, then? At least we are dressed for the part." "I do not think so," said Jordell. "Who knows if the master of the stronghold will even allow guards to attend? And if he does, we should not test our guises so stringently as that, for no quartermaster would be as easily fooled as the soldiers on patrol have been." "How, then?" said Lauren. "I can keep from being seen in my black cloak most of the time, but I cannot become invisible. Nor can you, unless you have some magic you have not shown me before." "No, I think we require a more ordinary sort of trickery here. Did you see the roof of the great hall when we passed by?" Lauren cast her mind back. She remembered great wooden rafters stretching above, and set high in either wall, large windows that stood open to the rainy sky, giving the whole place a gloomy chill. "You mean to sneak in through the windows? But how can we get there?" Jordell went to one of the room's cabinets and searched through its drawers. From the bottom one he pulled a length of rope. "With this. The rear of the hall is joined to the keep, which rises to the pinnacle of the stronghold, a final refuge against any invading force, from which the commander and his chosen guard can hold off an army. The top of the tower reaches some 10 paces above the roof of the hall. You should be able to climb down to it easily enough." She balked at his words. "I should. You speak as if you will not come with me." "Who will lower you down? And if some other guard should happen by, who will turn their eyes from the rope tied to the battlements? It must be you, Lauren, but I have great faith in you, and I know you shall not fail me." Lauren wished she had his faith, but she had little choice other than to obey, and indeed, she much preferred the idea of perching in the rafters above the hall to the thought of standing in attendance while Damaris was there. "Very well. What must I do?" "Only listen," said Jordell. "Keep yourself from being seen. That should be easy, for it is a dark day and the rafters are shadowed. Remember everything that is said, even if you do not understand it, and then return to me when they are done. You must recall every detail, no matter how slight. The manner in which a word is said can be just as important as the word itself." "I understand," said Lauren. "Let us go, then, before I lose my nerve." Jordell placed a hand on her shoulder and gave her a smile. "I admit to knowing little of you, Lauren of the family Nelda, less than I should at any rate, but I know, at least, that you have no shortage of courage. Come." First, Lauren ran to the drawer where she had hidden her black cloak. She folded it tightly and held it beneath her arm. Then Jordell tucked the rope beneath the folds of his cloak, and he led her from the guardroom into the torchlit halls of the stronghold. This has been a production of Legacy Books, written and narrated by Garrett Robinson. The music in this podcast was created by Will Musser. Check out his incredible work at willmusser.com. That's WILLMUSSER.com. Today's letter is O. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.